हाँ हेलो। हाँ तो उसमें बता रहे हैं कि 3 सेफ्टी वाला है, तो एक ही है ना, राजेश से दिखाई दे रहा है उसमें तो।
Can you mute your mic, please?
वही राजेश। हाँ तो क्या है? नहीं नहीं, ऐसा है नहीं, ऐसा नहीं है, वो गलत इन्फॉर्मेशन। वो HSC लीड है, वो पूरा हेड ऑफ रिफाइनरी है, मैं देख रहा हूँ उसको।
Can you mute your mic, please?
हाँ।
Hello and very good evening to you all, and welcome to our Qatar Branch meeting for this month, 17th of November. I would like to welcome you all on this evening to our session. And before we proceed into even the housekeeping, I would like to make an announcement that yesterday we had the handover for the new IOSH president who has took over from Jamie Queen. So now we have
डिपार्टमेंट हेड है मेरा।
Louise Hoskins. She is the
बात तो नहीं
president
जाओगे,
for
घंटा नहीं जाओगे
IOSH.
सुबह।
Excuse me. Hello. Can you please mute your mic? So now we have Louise Hoskins as IOSH president since yesterday. With that, I would like to go to the housekeeping slide. Make sure that your mics are muted during the presentation. Turn your view to the speaker's view. Only one speaker. If we have time, sometimes we allow people, to talk directly, and if we allow that, just one speaker at a time, please. You can choose to keep your camera off if you don't want to be recorded, because the meeting will be recorded. And then you may also type your questions or feedbacks on the chat room, and then Rocky will be facilitating that. The meeting will be locked after 20 minutes from now for security reasons. So with that, I would like to take you to our session for this evening. We have with us Dr. Farah Ahmed. Dr. Farah is a managing director. Excuse me, please. Hello, can you mute yourself, please? So Dr. Farah is the managing director and chief medical advisor at Noor Corporate Health. She's an occupational health and well-being consultant. She's a family doctor. Catherine, can you help with muting this this mic, please? The voice.
Ahmed, just hold on. I'll mute everyone and then I will unmute you.
Please. Okay. So as I said, our presenter this evening is Dr. Farah Ahmed. Dr. Farah, most of us here in IOSH Qatar, we know her because she has been very active, with us presenting on different topics that are related to mental health and stress and these kind of things. She is the managing director and a chief medical advisor at Noor Corporate Health in UAE. She is an occupational health and well-being consultant, and she's a family doctor. She holds a master's degree from University of Manchester in occupational medicine, and she has a bachelor of medicine MBBS, and she has more than 15 years of experience on occupational health and well-being. So this evening, Dr. Farah is going to address issues related to stress at work. And we know that this is one of the hot issues that most of us are facing on daily basis. and it's very challenging, you know, how to manage these things. And I was just kind of talking to Dr. Farah that one of the big challenges that we are facing is this switch off, because every time we are taking our personal problems and stress from home to work and vice versa, and from work to home, and so forth. So we need to have some sort of controls or management competencies that will allow us to manage these stress things. And I think one of the other challenges that are facing most of us in the profession is the risk assessment itself. How to do a risk assessment for these kind of topics, and how do we put the controls when it comes to stress management. So with that, please join me to welcome Dr. Farah on this presentation, and please make sure that if you have any question or any comment or anything, just put it on the chat room. Thank you very much. Back to you, Dr. Farah.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Ahmed. And always a pleasure to be here virtually in Qatar. So with you all, it's always an honor. So I'm just going to share my screen. You'll tell me if you are seeing my slides.
Yes. Yes.
All right. So yeah, so we're all here to talk about stress at work. Now, it's not so much of a personal presentation in terms of how the individual will cope with stress. I want to take you away from that for a little bit, and we discuss the management competencies. So we're talking about people managers and our role as occupational health safety professionals. You know, what role do we actually have to play in managing stress at work? So we'll go through what is stress and why it's important. Causes of stress at work. We'll look at the issue of work-life balance, because that tends to come up all the time as well. We're talking about risk assessing for stress in the workplace, as well as the management competencies for stress, and just to help, just the real basics about an action plan, how to move forward. And then we'd have the Q&A session in the end. So the first question I want to ask you all is, what is stress, right? And are employers and HSE professionals responsible for managing stress at work? So anybody wants to share any thoughts at this time?
If anybody want to share anything, you can unmute, or you can put your comment on the chat room, please.
I'll move on. So
Okay.
stress is really that adverse reaction that people have to excess pressures and demands, right? Now we need to examine this a little bit better. So we're talking about excess. So this is a variable issue, because some of us can take more, tolerate more than others. Or even if we are people who can tolerate a lot, we may not be having a good day, and that the extra pressure and demand becomes too much. But what happens as a result of that is what matters, is that adverse reaction. We need to have a bad reaction to whatever this excess demand is that's happening at that point in time. And that's basically what stress is. And are we responsible as occupational health and safety professionals? Yes, we are responsible. Why? It's because stress really, if you look at it, is a workplace hazard. And that's important because the effects of stress in the workplace, you have both short-term and long-term effects. And it affects your health, it affects safety, it affects performance. And these are key indicators in the workplace as well. So we are all human. And when we are faced with any degree of stress, it stresses our body. It also stresses our mind. It stresses us in our social environment. And all of these also have effects on our financial well-being. And so these are really important when we're looking at the whole person. And that's what we really should be looking at, rather than just individual problems or complaints. We should be looking at people as on a whole. And this is where it comes down to. So organizational versus individual support. So a lot of companies are making those changes to help support the individual at work. But we're here today to discuss more about the organizational support, what happens at that higher level. So first, we want to identify what are some of the causes of stress at work, and this is really important. So there's 6 main causes of stress at work. So we could group all into this 6 categories. The first is the demand. How much work are we expected to do within a given time? Or what are we expected to do? So demand is really important, and that's one big bit to look at. Another one that's significant is control. So how much control do we actually have in our day-to-day tasks? Are we given, that flexibility to choose to work in the time that we need? Or is it control at the level of you just need to do this, this, and this in this order, and that's it? You're not allowed to think, you're not allowed to do anything else. You're just allowed to just do the way you were told to do it. And that affects us because we're all different people and we operate differently. We would think differently, and we may have different ways of achieving the same end results, but are we allowed to do that? Another aspect is support. And this support comes in from your support that's around you to help you do your job. So it could be from your managers, it could be from other teams, it could be from access to just resources. Do you have what you need to do your job better? And that level of support is something that we need to look at to see if that is a source of stress. Now, one big issue that's been happening is the role issue, because a lot of companies have, we've laid off, a lot of people have gone home, and the ones who are left behind have to take up the roles that other people were doing before. And this is where the role becomes unclear. And once you have that role being unclear, that is another significant burden of stress on the individual. Now, relationships, again, another key aspect. And it's not just about the relationships in the workplace, it also covers bullying, harassment. And another key one that I like to bring up all the time is that relationship that you have with your line manager, your direct reporting, right? That relationship evidence has shown that that relationship is significant in terms of how you perceive your work and your stress levels at work. We'll discuss that a little bit more. And then this whole idea of uncertainty. Now, uncertainty stresses anybody out, in life. But when it comes to uncertainty at work, this is a significant source of stress. And I think most of us, if not all of us, have been through this in the last year. We're not sure what's going to happen with our jobs, if projects are going to be cut, are we the next to go? And this level of uncertainty is a significant source of stress. And as an occupational health professional, I, looked at how companies were, dealing with this uncertainty with their employees. And some of them just didn't get it right at all in terms of how they communicated with their employees in terms of giving them that guidance through this uncertainty period. So when we want to look for stress in teams in particular, there are certain signs that you can look for, right? So one is arguments. Are there a lot of people quarreling in your department? Are there, back and forths? So we have to look at that as one key sign. Another one is decreased performance. The team might have been performing very well before, and then all of a sudden your team is not performing the way that they used to perform. Then all of a sudden there are more complaints and grievances. People are reporting on others, and lots of politics inside of the department, and that's significant. That tells you that something is going on in that department. Then a higher staff turnover. Are people leaving? Are people saying, that's it, I'm done, I'm out of here? And you have new people constantly coming in because people are leaving. Then simply, some people just report stress, and this is not something that's openly shared. It might be shared in a coffee conversation or something like that, but this is something that we, again, as occupational health professionals, we have to pay attention, because we do have the eyes and the ears around everywhere else that management may not have. So that's something that we need to look at as well. Are we hearing these complaints? And then another key indicator is the sickness absence. Are people reporting sick more often than before? So all these, not in isolation, but together, or a mix of them, will tell you that your team might be under more stress than before. So how do we manage that? And that's important, and especially for us occupational health and safety professionals, that occupational health system management, which is part of our core management competencies, these technical skills that we have to have. And my slide is stuck. One second. So I'll just play it from here. So the first, what we normally do for any risk assessment that we have to do, or planning, we always have to go through this plan, do, check, act, and it's a continuous process. And this is where we risk assess. Now, as we said, stress itself is a workplace hazard. So we need to figure out what that risk is for our teams. And when we're planning in this planning stage, what we have to do, or what we should do, is first things first, which is secure commitment. So securing commitment is really important, and that has to be at different levels in the organization. The first place you'd want to start is at senior leadership. So once these senior leaders have bought into this idea that stress is significant and we need to look at it in the workplace, then you're going somewhere. We also have to look at how this is related to the employees, and if employees themselves are committed to seeing this process through. And we look at the employee representatives as well. So part of planning, what we want to do is to create these steering groups. So we would want to look at all the departments and all the levels in the company and try to get key people who can sit in the steering committee, so that the whole organization is then represented when you're looking at risk assessing or planning how you're going to carry out these risk assessments for stress in the workplace. And then we want to develop a plan. So when that team is formed, you'd want to figure out how are we moving forward. And one of the key points to start, or places to start, should say, is at that communication policy. How are we going to relay information to everyone? And then the organizational stress policy, which should also be a separate policy that exists and to help develop along the way. Let's see if this works again. So yes, so for the risk assessments, we have to look at it as a holistic picture. We cannot look at it as isolated incidents. It's not like an incident report that we're doing. We're looking at the full picture, and we have to examine it in all aspects. Now, key aspect again is to look at the root causes, right? Root causes goes beyond what we see on the surface level. So maybe something happened, two people are arguing, or some department conflict or something like that that's being investigated. But if you're looking at the stress as a cause, or even sickness absence as one of the parameters that you're looking at, you have to go back now to the root cause. What is causing it? And we should try to frame that back into the 6 dimensions: your demand, your control, support, relationships. We have to get back to those to figure out where that root cause would lie. And we have to explore all these issues at the organizational level. Slide is stuck. Right, so tools, how do we actually go about this? Now, there are many different surveys that we can use for workplace stress, right? The Health and Safety Executive in the UK has a nice one that we use. IOSH as well has their own survey for workplace stress assessments. So we can start with that. But it can't be that assessment alone. What we have to look at is all the other key data that we have. So we would have sickness absence, and I'm sure nobody really looks at. There would be productivity you have look at as well, like performance reviews and all these other key aspects. Staff turnover is an important aspect if this is happening in one particular department or one particular area, or is it just overall what's happening? The diagnoses as well could be a clue. Is everybody suffering from high blood pressure? Are there a lot of people having heart attacks? And even look at referrals, like are people being referred to psychologists more? Are people being referred to psychiatrists more? These are all key things to look at when we're looking at stress in the workplace. And then what would be helpful as well is doing these toolbox talks or creating these focus groups where you discuss more about what's happening at work and get the employee input better so that you understand their point of view a little bit more. So let me see, I'm gonna do this will work. Yeah. So when we're looking again at the risk management, we look at it from different levels. So we look at it at the, if we're looking at the health aspects, we're looking at it at the primary level. So how do we eliminate the source of this health risk, whatever that health risk is, whether it's heart attacks, strokes, or high blood pressure, or secondary effects would be early detection. So, there's stress, a lot of mental health issues in the workplace. People have already been affected. There are lots of people with high blood pressure. How do we go about detecting these things early if we know that it already exists? And then the tertiary side will be to minimize the effect of any clinical disease. So we know we have X number of employees who have recently been diagnosed with hypertension, and they are struggling. How do we minimize them now to help them prevent any further damage from happening within their bodies? So again, we come back to our pyramid, right? So the first thing that we would want to do is to eliminate the sources of stress. Now, that's not always possible, right? We have to look at the issues that really threaten our health, our safety, and our well-being in the workplace. So that's not always possible, but we go into the substitute realm, and this is where, for me, is a big game changer, because if we are able to create policies and programs that are health or even occupational health focused or themed in that sense, we can actually change the way our organizational culture develops. So that's one key aspect that we need to look at. Then we would look at redesign. How do we redesign our work environment to help support our employees with health, safety, and well-being? This is, again, it could be redesign of the job. It could be redesign of making sure that there's enough support, resources, even training programs as well can help. And that's where we go into the educate. So we have to educate, not just for safety, health, and well-being, but here, this is where supervisor training is really important to help bring about the awareness that they actually play a role in managing these issues at work. And then the last bit is to encourage personal change. And that's at the individual level. Now, what's been happening is that lots of companies have been focusing on that last bit, as usual. We're at the bottom of the pyramid, and we're that small portion to encourage. And that aspect, studies have shown that what actually matters more to employees who are facing stress is by having organizational acknowledgement and organizational changes, as opposed to telling the individual or giving them mindfulness classes or these little individual things that we do to support our employees. This actually has not been shown to be the most effective in terms of employee feedback. Employees would rather their organization take more proactive approach at the organizational level to help them manage stress, rather than giving them these personal things to help. So part of the remember, again, for our management competencies for occupational health and safety is we have to have that core and behavioral competency. So we look at our role is to give advice, right? We have to provide advice for leadership and business continuity. And this is where, for me, it's important for us to use all the information we just gathered in our data collecting to make that business case. Why is this important for the workplace and how it impacts moving forward? And this is where the whole strategy and planning comes in. So again, with the top buy-in, we always have to make sure that there is funding to help. And once the funding is committed, then you know that there is buy-in from the top and you can plan forward. And how you do it is important because it, again, these individual, little workshops or mindfulness sessions or whatever it is that we do to help support our employees, that's not a proper strategy. You need to actually have a full strategy to map out where you're going over the next year or few years. And this is where, again, we come in. Our role is important to influence, to collaborate with each other. So we're looking at occupational health as a huge umbrella, and we're looking at all the players in the equation to collaborate to help the business team develop something that's worthwhile for their organization. And remember, we have to develop our negotiation skills so that our case can be brought forward. Now, the action plan, what do we need to actually do? Now, one of the key aspects that we talk about, or when you get feedback from anybody, as Ahmed mentioned in the beginning, again, it's about that work-life balance and managing it. Now, what time is the big issue, right? And when people talk about work-life balance, there are many different definitions. So sometimes people talk about work versus non-work as work, there's a clear line. But as Ahmed said before, is that there's no clear line. We take home these issues sometimes, or our home stresses come back and affect us at work. So there is no clear line. And then people look at it as a conflict, like work conflicts with life, and it's not something that go together. Or maybe it's, it's a sense of fulfillment. It's like, I've achieved this, or maybe they have some sort of control over their life, right? But when the HSC defines work-life balance, what they look at is the working hours that would sufficiently support the individual to have their desired balance between their home and family life and work, and whether this is achieved and maintained, not all, but and maintained. So this is where the International Labour Organization put forward the concept of decent work. Like, what is decent work? So there are 5 dimensions to decent working time. This is from the International Labour Organization. So there's a healthy working time. My thing's stuck again. So there's healthy working time. There is family-friendly working time. There's something called gender equality through working time, productive working time, and the choice and influence regarding working time. Now, the healthy working time has to do with what we as humans are capable of having that, what is the maximum that we can work without burning out or even getting close to that. Then there's the family-friendly working time. Are you giving people calls at whatever hour in the night when they should really be with their family? Are you asking your employees to work on the weekend? Or, do you factor these things into consideration? Then there's a gender equality through working time. If the job design itself just basically promotes men to do these roles because it's too difficult for a woman who has to manage the family as well. This is also an aspect that we need to look at. And then productive working time as well is important. And that reflects into your choice. Do you have any control over the time that you work? So when we break it down now, so that's when we look at the demand, if we have to do our risk assessments, and our standard would be that our employees are they able to cope with the demands of the job? And that's one of the key aspects that we need to look at. Are we meeting that target? So now the first way to help that is by reduction of regular long working hours. Now, granted, long working hours is something that we all face, and sometimes that's not a bad thing, depending on how your shift pattern is, or if it is, you need to meet a deadline and it's a one-off. But the concept of having a regular long working hours, that is a potential health hazard for anybody. It affects you. It increases your level of stress. It affects your health. It affects your mental health. And this is a problem. It will affect your performance, and that's given. It will affect it. And the concept of having these flexible work hours as well, while avoiding unsocial hours, these are things that you can mention to management as well in terms of how to manage employees better. And different organizations play around with different rostering for different times, and you'll eventually find the one that works best for your department or that keeps your employees functioning well. Then there's this concept of illegitimate tasks. Now, an illegitimate task is basically has to do with that workload or that deadline that's given to you that's basically impossible for you to meet, because humanly you can't do it. It's not possible in the time frame, and that illegitimate task is really important. So you need to look at that. Are we making reasonable demands on our staff? And then breaks. So allowing breaks for people to just unwind, to de-stress by just doing simple little exercises in terms of stretching, just to move their position from sitting for a long time to let them just walk around a bit. These little things actually make a big difference in terms of how people respond to stress in the workplace. Now, the other aspect is control, right? This is one of the other causes. Now, the standard would be that, again, are employees able to cope with these demands of the job? And this is where we look at the job design. Are you able to work at your own pace, or are you, forced to do something that that doesn't keep up with you, or you cannot keep up with it? It's about negotiating shifts as well. Do you have that flexibility to say that, if I can get my shift move or not? And then all these aspects of active decision making in the job itself. So do I have any level of control to say that I think I have a better way of doing this that's simpler or easier? Am I allowed to say that? Could I express that in the workplace? And these things are important. And this is again where manager supervisor training comes in, because if management is aware that these things make a difference, how they approach the employee would also be different. When it comes to the role now, the standard would be that employees indicate that they understand their roles and responsibilities. So if you are not sure of where your role and responsibility ends, again, we know that that's a source of stress, but the standard should be that you know. So employers should try their best, or we should advise them to ensure that clear rules are there, that the employees know what their role is. Then there's a clear structure. Someone once told me that they went to a job interview, and the person, the interviewer told them, hey, we have no structure in this organization. Can you work with that? The person said yes, but having a clear structure is important to help manage stress in the workplace. And at least, maybe in that particular interview, maybe by the employee knowing what to expect, that could have sort of protected them and prevented them from being completely stressed out when it hit them. But maybe knowing that helped them prepare better. Then thorough inductions is important, because when you have a new employee and you go through everything with them, it really prepares them mentally for what they should expect. And we all know that joining any new job is difficult for anyone, because it's a whole adjustment period, it's a learning period, and a thorough induction would help with helping them deal with that stress. And another important aspect here is to avoid competing demands. So if you know, or you are hearing complaints that they expect me to do this, but then they want me to do this, and it's impossible to do two of things at the same time, that's significant, because that means the demands itself are conflicting, and it takes away time, and it's impossible to perform your task properly. So, and this comes to the level of support. So the standard would be that employees indicate that they receive adequate information and support from their colleagues and superiors. So it's safe for you to then go and ask someone for help if you need. And we start off to make sure that there are policies and procedures in place, our SOPs are up to date. And this is where we help with those aspects as well, to ensure that things are laid out in a manner that's easy for employees to understand, and it protects them as well. Knowing how to access resources is also important. Sometimes employees are not even aware that resources are available to them, and they don't even know how to access it. So helping raise awareness in the organization is also important. And regular and constructive feedback. Now, this one is important because, again, evidence shows that that supervisor relationship that you have with whoever your direct line is. Now, you know, it's okay if you are a nice manager and you ask about how are you, how's your family, you know, this sort of thing. Yes, that's nice, and that's all well and good that you're taking interest. But what has been proven to be more effective in helping the employee is having that regular constructive feedback specific to work, by letting them know, you have been doing well in this, you know, we see some room for improvement in this aspect. Would you be interested in doing this? So it's regular and constructive feedback to help the employee, and that significantly relieves their stress. And this comes back to the relationship, right? Where the standard is that employees indicate that they are not subjected to any unacceptable behaviors at work. So whether it's bullying at work with anybody else, or that specific relationship, again, as I said, with the line manager. And this is where I keep coming back again, that we should advocate for more supervisor training to help line managers understand their role in the company and their role in managing staff. And to do that, what a manager would want to do is understand that there's a difference between their approach. So you could have a relationship focused approach or a task focused approach. So where you approach the staff member saying, you know, out of that, I want to help you develop better. So you're developing more of a relationship rather saying, no, you need to do this and do this now. It's you know, it's just the approach. And what is helpful is having that transformational approach rather than a transactional. So it's not about just, okay, you did this today, check, you did this today, like a checklist, not like that. You want to really help the employee grow in the role that they're in. And then there's the behavior aspects as well, the mental health and the physical aspects that are important, because again, evidence shows that, so there was this one study that the employees had two managers. One was viewed as a bad manager and the other one was perceived as a good manager. And what they did was look at how the employees interacted with these managers, and they checked their blood pressure levels at the end of the day. And what was found was that the manager that was perceived as bad, employees' blood pressure levels went up during those shifts. But when they were under the good supervisor in the same workplace, the blood pressures were fine, and even some were even better than home blood pressure readings that they had, which means that the supervisor could even have a protective effect on the employee if they're perceived as good. So the last aspect would be the uncertainty. This is the last cause of stress. And the standard would be that employees indicate that the organization engages them frequently when undergoing any organizational change. So what that means is that the employer is informing the employee early on that these changes are potentially happening, or at least keep them in the loop that something is happening and this is what we may have to do. So the earlier they're informed is better. Now, including them as well, including them in their decision-making process, or hearing them out in terms of what their needs are, or what they might want to do, is also important to help. So that, again, this is where when there are big layoffs or anything that's happening, this is where we should step in, occupational health and safety should step in and say that these are the things that we should do to help the employees manage better, include them from the start. And, you know, speaking to employees about time scales, and if that, whatever this is, directly impacts their job, this is also important. So just wrapping up here, the take-home points, what I would want you to know, is that stress is a workplace hazard, and that's why we have a responsibility to help manage that in the workplace. Our role as occupational health and safety professionals is to risk assess and advise on strategies and policies to help with stress in the workplace. Top level support is important, and this is where we need to start. If we don't have the buy-in at the top, then, you know, it's unlikely to be fruitful. Time is a crucial factor when making changes in or making recommendations to help with employee stress relief. In that sense, looking at their time is important. Supervisor training, I come back to this again, it's really important to help. And then having that collaborative approach where we all work together to help reshape and redesign the workplace in order to help with stress in the workplace. So thank you very much. These are just my references, and I think that's it. Yeah. So
you are muted.
yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farah. And now Rocky will facilitate the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farah. I think your presentation was really excellent. By the way, it means the people were so much engrossed that they couldn't even think about some questions, because either it's totally understood or it is totally bounced off. But I'm sure it is the totally understood part, because the one of the thing is they all want the presentation. So that is sure that they are liking it. So I'm also in support of the first one. There is one question, definitely, only one. Then we can have it open presentation. Questions can be asked open here. Okay, one question. It's a very good question. You have answered a bit of it, but I will want to just repeat that question. It is by Mr. Taj. He has said that when the support is being mentioned, yeah, what does it mean? Yeah, is it the social support? Is it the motivational support? Is it the financial support? Or is it any other support? This is one part of which type of support is required. And the second part of the same question is, who is responsible for providing what is, you know, the common coin word, suitable and sufficient, the 2S, the suitable and sufficient support. Because how do we know that it is, you know, able to have the adequate control to manage it well? And is it primarily the top management or the line management? Or I would say, is it even the worker to manage himself also? So this is the way it is. Over to you, Dr. Farah.
Thanks so much for the question. So to clarify what support means, so support in this means support to do your job. That's what's important, right? So it's not support, again, from the individual side. So as much as I mentioned before, you can support employees as on the individual side, but if you're looking at the whole organization in terms of how to manage, we're looking at support to do your job. So meaning you have been assigned a particular task. You need to, you know, look at some figures or facts or something like that. And then somebody, they tell you this is what you need to do. You need to prepare a presentation based on this. But they don't give you what you need to do that, or you don't have any guidance on how do I do that, how this has been done before. You can't go to anybody to, nobody's willing to help you to figure out how do I do this. So that is the kind of support we're looking at. We're looking at support specific to the getting the job done, because if you don't have that support, that is a significant level of stress that you will have now to try to figure out how to do that, right? Now, when it comes to the responsibility, so it's a shared responsibility. So it's managing stress at work is a shared responsibility. You have to have, again, as I said, buy-in from everybody, but top buy-in is important in terms of the whole organization. But if the line managers then understand what their role is, they would significantly help the employees as well as improve the overall culture of the organization. And then it's also up to the employee, because we all have our personal responsibility to manage our stress and to as well voice our concerns in a safe space, if that's even possible. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, Mr. Taj, is it okay? Because we have few questions, we can take personal interactions also. Mr. Taj, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I listened to her very carefully. And yes, I have noted her points, and thank you for answering it very well. Thank you.
That was nice of you, Mr. Taj. There is another question come up just now by Mr. Gilbert. His question is, can stress and violence be used to mean the same thing? What is the difference between the two?
Okay, so that's a clear distinction in terms of stress and violence. Now, violence obviously will cause stress, right? Violence is that actual attacking of, there's something that's physically hurting someone else. That is violence, and that will increase stress levels if that is something that's being faced in the workplace. But stress itself is a whole different commodity. Stress is, it could include violence, but it's a lot more aspects in the workplace, especially to that would cause stress. I hope that makes sense. So stress is that extra pressure and demand, but if that pressure is because of violence, then it's part of it, is a cause, but not then they're definitely not the same. Hope that helps.
Thank you very much, Doctor. We also got gents. We just want, ladies and gents, it is just about stress itself is a very big topic. Here the focus is on occupational. So we talk about always occupational health and safety or related things. Yes, it can be personal related stresses also. So it has a very wide dimension. So here we restrict to the scope, like in Dr. Farah started only told us about what is the definition and it's work related. Then now let's go to another question, which is really interesting. It is talking about by Mr. Mohammad Taki. He said that if the stress arises due to the company management, is there any low strength in management? Is there any law, actually maybe law is trying to say, law strengthening the management?
Okay, laws. Yeah. So again, stress is not especially in this region, is not, and not in just in the region, in many parts, that stress is not a separate, again, separate under law to help. We do have the broad definitions in the law to help. We are duly bound to protect our employees, right? But specific to stress, no, there's no actual something that says for stress. But this is why I think it's important for us to promote in organizations where we have that influence. So let them know that this is important to come up with an organizational stress management policy, how to manage stress in the workplace. And I think this is what would help the company go to another level in terms of that, adding that not personal, but that organizational responsibility becomes something more of a reality if it's written into a policy. But in terms of the law itself, there's no specific law dealing with stress.
Yeah. So, Mr. Taqib, does that answer your questions? Dr. Farah, you're doing very well. You are getting more and more questions, and people are really wanting to know more things. One of the new question that has just come up is by Mr. Emmanuel. It's like, what are the indicators of stress at work on organizational level? So it is not about individual level, but at the organizational level.
Right. So again, we have to look at the data that's available. So indicators, as I mentioned before, if we have to do a risk assessment, we would look at how the employees feel or how they would rate each aspect. So we're looking at the demand, whether they're able to meet the demands of their job or not, whether they have adequate control over their job to meet the particular demand. It's those 6 different aspects. Now, we can't look at that survey alone. We have to look at it at the whole spectrum. So other indicators could be looking at sickness absence data, or you're looking at performance levels, like groups meeting the targets that they were supposed to. Are they meeting their KPIs? If they were meeting them before, they're not meeting them now. So all these different things, you have to look at it together to get the whole picture, because when you're managing stress, you have to have that holistic approach. You can't just do a survey and say, well, my organization is stressed or not stressed. You can't look at it like that alone. You have to look at all the different aspects. So you look at your sickness absence, you look at employee turnover, you look at performance, you look at all these different aspects, and you put it together to see if there really is an issue happening, one that needs addressing.
We are getting more questions. That's good also, good signs. People are interested to know more about it. One more question from Mr. Samshay. He wants to know, what is the best way to avoid stress, especially on construction site? Means among the lot, he wants the best one.
Right. So in the construction is a really different industry, right? Because there's a specific culture that goes along with construction. And especially when it comes to, you're already faced with high demands, and those demands are not in your control. And that creates a big problem, right? The other side of working in construction as well is that just the culture of it, you have to be strong, right? You have to be strong, and you can't show your signs of weaknesses. So the best way I would say, you can't avoid as in eliminate stress anyway in this particular situation, but what you can do is sort of create a culture where people can open up and are free to talk. Or maybe if you have, again, under your occupational health services, you can have someone who they can go to speak with to help. And then that should be the beginning of mapping out a plan. But if you want the best thing, you have to go to the top people, sell your business case, and this is where you would, this is where you start. You have to start there.
That was a good answer. Thank you, Doctor. I think so. When we talk about best, it is subjective. It may be suitable. One thing may be most effective for one organization at one place at one time and different for another. But on an overall, yes, we need the top management to take care. We have another question. Very good question. This is again by Mr. Taj. He wants to know your opinion. This is your opinion, personal opinion. Yes, it's an ISO standard. It is well known, but he wants your personal opinion on ISO 45003. Will that be useful for mitigation, recognition, prevention, if it is implemented well? And also, can it be done mandatory? Like similar, of course, ISO is not mandatory in any way. It's a voluntary standard. So your opinion, Dr. Farah?
My personal opinion is the same, I think, with any of these sort of policies that come about. And it's that these, remember, you could implement any policy in your workplace, but but not implement. You could come up with or create any policy in your workplace, but it's how it's implemented is always important. So how an organization decides to use the ISO guidelines, that is what's going to matter in terms of whatever the outcome would be and how relevant it is to your organization. So I think anything in theory can be very good, but it's how it's practiced is what will make the difference. As well, if you could make it mandatory, it's not meant to be mandatory. And again, it's how it is applied, I would suggest, it's really how these things are put into practice. In my field in medicine, we have, we look at the gold standards in these countries like the UK, Canada, wherever, and then, us other countries who are not bound to these guidelines, we still try to adopt those, right? So it works in the UK, let me apply it in my hospital, or let me apply it in my setting. But you would realize it doesn't work. It's not a blanket. You can't just take one set of guidance and then fully put it in your organization. As you mentioned, Ricky, is that it's a tailoring. You have to tailor it to your organization in order for it to be of benefit. I hope that helps answer the question.
Fantastic. The ending words were very good. Basically, ISO doesn't tell you how to do, but only tells you just what is the best way to do, plan, do, check out. So each one will be doing it differently. One more question we are getting, it's an interesting now topic. It is going more and more interesting. Gilbert has again asked another question. If management does not create the mechanism to help the employees control the stress, is there any other way that the employees can do it on their own to manage the stress on their own, if there is no support?
So I could give you an answer that managers will not like to hear, right? So basically, we had a saying back in hospital long ago, gosh, if I could remember it. If they're paying you to do this, you're going to do that amount of work, right? So basically, there's the concept in HR is that this is just figures and from evidence that for an employee to actually just do their job, to keep their job and to just do the minimum they can do, they just put out 30% of their effort, right? And the maximum effort you would want an employee to put out would not be 100% because that leads to burnout. You would want to be at least 80% that you can get from an employee. So if management is not doing anything to control your stress as an employee, you can control that by doing the amount of work that you think you can do, if you understand what I mean. So, but it's about that level of where you can and manage. Now, because why I say that is because the time factor is important. And if it is, you are working 60+ hours a week, and it's impossible for you to find time to even breathe, what else would you do in that situation? That's what I'm saying, right? But for if it's just anybody else working and you're managing with your shift patterns, you're managing with your work-life balance, but it's just the stress is too high for you, then simple personal techniques can help. One is learning how to manage your emotions better, problem solving, identifying where the source or that root cause is and figuring out how to help that. There are other ways in terms of building relationships as well, finding that support. So if you cannot get the support from management, there may be other people who you can call. You have a project to do and nobody in the organization is willing to help you, but you know someone outside of the organization who can help you with it. You form your own support network. So, I mean, this could go on and on. There are lots and lots of things that an individual can do to help themselves, but it's just about figuring out what works for them in that situation.
That was good. Well said, Doctor. Means I could say it in my own words. It is very tough. It's very tough to manage stress. But just to make it right on a lighter note, I will say nobody can hurt you unless you wish to be hurt. So,
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
you can look at it how you can do it. Any more questions? You can come speak directly also. I think you can switch on your mic and talk directly.
I think, Rocky, we are running out of time.
Yeah.
So if anybody has any further question, maybe he can just send it to us, and then we will forward it to Dr. Farah, and we'll.
Thank you very
We'll
much.
send it back. Yeah, we'll send it back. So.
Thank you.
I think with that, we need to conclude the session. Thank you very much, Dr. Farah, for your very informative presentation, and it was very straightforward. And I think it provided us with like lots of tools that we can make use of to manage this stress that we're having at work. So thank you again, and we look forward to have you again with us, maybe in another session, because I know that the topic is very wide and we need to discuss it further. So thank you for that. Thank you, Rocky, and thank you all for attending this session with us today. We are going to have our next session on the 1st of December. And this one will be on how to transform your business in the era of safety and well-being, like people's power. And this one will be presented by Karen Hewitt, and she is the author of one of the best-selling books nowadays in health and safety, which is the People's Power as well. So Dr. Farah, you are invited as well to attend with us that presentation. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please ensure that you give a good feedback. We need support. Farah also needs it, and IOSH will definitely see to it that they give you more better and better presentations.
Yes, absolutely. And make sure that you follow us on LinkedIn, because we share all the links for these kind of sessions and recording. So make sure that you are following us on LinkedIn. So I think Valentine has taken some shots, right? So if you need to take like a final one,